This week on another episode of Make Sports Easy podcast, we are talking about the playoffs. Now, specifically, we'll be talking about the college football playoffs and how that is going to unfold. We already previewed Alabama, but we're going to get into the other three games as well. Let's go ahead and lock in, tune in, and have a good time. Are you tired of watching the game and not knowing when to cheer? Are Sundays full of football and confusing lingo? Or maybe sports is a mainstay in your family and you feel on the outside looking in? Well, let's get you in the game. Welcome to Make Sports Easy, a football podcast where we take the seemingly complicated and confusing and make it easy for you. So, let's get the game started. Down, set, hut. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Make Sports Easy. Getting down to the college playoff football edition. So hype. Today is going to be an episode where we talk about the 4 games that we're going to see this weekend. And we'll just get to a quick preview, what you can expect when you watch the game. And just talk about the importance of these games moving forward because of the implications of what happens in the next week. So we'll also go through that. But before we jump into all that, we just ask that you guys like, share, subscribe, whichever platform that you find this podcast on, whether it be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Please just show your support, subscribe, so we can continue to reach other people and continue this Make Sports Easy journey with everyone. So with that being said, we're going to get into the first couple of games, and we will start with the Miami versus Texas A&M game. So we have 4 games going on this week. 1 game on Friday, 3 games on Saturday. Now, one of the marquee games will be the Miami versus Texas A&M game for a number of reasons. And these are some of the storylines you may hear. Miami had a controversial entrance into the playoffs, and that is because of whether Notre Dame was more worthy or if there was another team that should have got in over them, or if Alabama even was qualified to get in. But we already talked about that in previous episodes, but that's something that people will talk about if Miami doesn't show well. But as far as the game itself, it is going to be played at home, which is the first round of playoffs. It'll have home games, so it'll be played on campuses as opposed to a neutral site bowl game, which are also going on right now. So what to expect? I feel like the linchpin to winning this game will be the quarterback performances. Now, that is the case with any game. So that may sound a little bit repetitive, or you have heard that before. However, in this case, the teams have quarterbacks who don't often play. Let's just put it this way. If they're off, then the whole team is like super off. So, for instance, with Texas A&M, when they played South Carolina not too long ago, their quarterback, Marcel Reed, had a difficult first half. He just wasn't on the same page, turning the ball over, which is something that's very uncharacteristic of him. He wasn't being aggressive or decisive in his quarterback play. And the score showed it. I feel like they were down like something like 30-0. It was crazy. And it was like, oh my goodness, there is no way that they're going to come back and win this game. However, he came back in the second half, and I don't even want to say he played overly spectacular. He just played his game, and he let the game come to him. He ran the ball effectively, and he performed the way that a lot of people expect him to. And Texas A&M was able to generate enough offense as well as play physical defense complementary, and they won the game. So why do I say that? Miami has a very aggressive defense, as well as Texas A&M. So those, I feel like on either side of the ball, the defenses will show up and they will play their role as far as playing championship football. Because at this point in the season, it's not about who was great in the first half or even the second half in general. It's like who's coming in playing their best football, and you want to be peaking and playing your best at the right time. And I feel like Miami is more in that boat, in that category, than Texas A&M. So if we're making picks, which I guess we'll be doing, I will take Miami over Texas A&M in a close competition. I like Miami's quarterback, Carson Beck, because of his performance in games in the past and his likelihood of being more consistent than Texas A&M's quarterback, because that's really the only difference in the two. Not that he's exceedingly more talented, I guess, if you want to say it from that aspect. He's more athletic. He has played great throughout this season, but I just like Carson Beck's ability to lead a little bit more in this situation, and it's by the finest of margins. But I would take Miami over Texas A&M in this game. But pay attention to how Texas A&M quarterbacks play, because even with all that being said, if Texas A&M's quarterback plays well, they are going to be difficult to defeat. And so if he plays well, the Aggies will win. If not, that opens the door for Miami. Now, before we get into the big game tonight, there are two other games that, for lack of, I guess, personal knowledge, I would say, I'm going to lump them in the same category as far as how we talk about these games, with one caveat with the Tulane versus Ole Miss game. So Tulane is going to play Ole Miss tonight. In Saturday. And James Madison will travel to Eugene, Oregon to play the Oregon Ducks. Now, why am I putting them both in the same category? I feel like we should do that. We'll probably do that next week, real briefly. Talk about Power 4, Group of 5, and Power 5. We'll talk about what those conferences or what those terms mean. But the Group of 5 is different from the major conferences in college football. They are kind of the next tier down as far as level of competition. More so when you think about it, in some instances, the level of funding and things that they have for their programs. And historically, that has led to wide margins of victory when those teams go to a bump up in competition level and tiers. And Tulane already played Ole Miss earlier this year at Ole Miss. And while Ole Miss is still is going through a transition phase with a new coaching staff, or not a whole new staff, but just, they lost their head coach, or he departed to coach at another team for next year. We are in a situation where we have two potential blowouts. Now, to say that would be to also insinuate that in other playoff games in the past, especially when they started with the 4-team layout, there were blowouts and shutouts in those games as well. So it would be disingenuous to say, the Group of 5 teams, these games aren't going to be competitive. There are a lot of games we went into thinking that they were going to be competitive as well, and they weren't. For instance, when Clemson was running shop on folks, Clemson and Alabama were going back and forth with who was the better program in the country, and they were dominating people in the first round of those playoffs. So it'd be disingenuous to say that about James Madison and Tulane. However, Tulane already playing Ole Miss earlier this year and got blown out. And without much of a difference, or barring some new game plan that Tulane's going to come up with, I think Ole Miss is going to be locked in and they're going to be ready to go. So that game could potentially be a blowout. Both teams, percentage-wise, have 84% likelihood of winning when it comes to the betting odds versus not winning. So when the professionals, or the people who are, always making these odds and making these bets, like Vegas, I say you are 88% chance at winning, 84% chance at winning. Those games might not be competitive going down the stretch. The hope is, as a viewer and a fan of college football, that at least for the first half, these teams show up and it's not over in the first quarter. Oregon is looking to stake their claim as the best team in the country, and so is Ole Miss. So I will watch them probably from beginning to end and hope that these teams that have been counted out and are wearing an underdog role, we'll see how that plays out. So those are why I lumped those two games in the same categories. As we round the bases, Alabama, Oklahoma. We talked about that game already, but let's just go back to it real quickly in last week's episode. Alabama has a lot to prove. Their coach is in high demand. If they lose, even though they've already stated that their plan is to stay and be the coach next year, you never know how that's going to play out when people are throwing money and other opportunities at you in maybe a better competitive situation when it comes to like mental health and well-being and how much of a runway someone's going to give you. When you're the man who's following the man, which is Alabama's coach, following Nick Saban, arguably the greatest college football coach of all time, it is difficult to have the time to put your stamp on the program. And people just want instant success. And while they have been a better than good program, there's still this expectation of competitive excellence that they have not displayed. So what can we garner from that? If you just look at the facts, the last few weeks of the season, we talk about you want to play your best football at the end of the season, Alabama has been tailing off versus Oklahoma kind of staying steady, rising. They haven't peaked. They're not playing the best that they've played all season, but they're playing really well. The quarterback play, once again, is going to be important in this game, but not as much as in the first game we talked about with Miami and Texas A&M, and I'm going to tell you why. The quarterback for Oklahoma, the quarterback for Alabama, were both in the Heisman candidate conversation early in the season. Before injuries and play took them out of the conversation, these two were really high on that list and looked like they were going to have magical seasons. So the quarterbacks, Simpson and for Alabama and Mateer for Oklahoma, were playing lights out at the beginning of the year. For whatever reason, Mateer more so from injury. He had to get surgery on some broken bones in his hand, I believe. And Simpson his play just tailed off. So how do we go about figuring out what to pay attention to in this game? Their play is very important. However, the most important thing is Simpson's play not Simpson's play, but Simpson's joint play with the running game at Alabama. They had a lot of injuries going into that SEC championship game. Make no excuses. Everyone has to deal with injuries. They had deal with them at very key positions. And when you are missing like 4 people on your offense, that 1 or 2 maybe, but 4, that is a lot to make up for. So this is what I want you to pay attention to. Against Alabama, they ran for -3 yards. That is unfathomable for a championship game in a team that is trying to win a national championship. If they cannot run the football against Oklahoma, it will be a repeat performance because Oklahoma plays a very, very opportunistic, aggressive form of defense. And if they can make you one-dimensional, meaning that you have to abandon the run and you also can't do it when you have to, it's going to be a long day. I am hoping for an extremely competitive game that will show a lot of people that Alabama and their coach has some hope for the future, because Ty Simpson also hasn't played very well, and I'm not sure if he's able to come out in the NFL draft this year, but I think it would behoove him to come back for another season, because he was trending towards a number 1 overall pick, and now day 2, maybe day 3 type of pick is what type of tape he has put out there. So I am going for, if I had to choose, starting from the beginning, I would say Miami will win, Oregon and Ole Miss will win, and Oklahoma will all move on to the next round. And I think all those teams in the top 4 are clearly in the top 4 for a reason. And whoever wins their matchup in the first round, is going to have their hands full when they have to play in round 2. However, I am truly looking forward to competitive matchups all around. And like I said before, in those matchups where people think that those teams are going to get blown out, I really hope they're able to garner up enough strategy and intensity to outlast just maybe scoring on the first drive, and have that prolonged and keeping on into the second half. So that's all I got for you today. College football playoffs, we out here, we're doing it. And I can't wait for you all to sit back and enjoy and have something to talk about and enjoy the game with your loved ones. Once again, we wouldn't be anywhere we are without y'all. We thank you so much for your support. On whatever platform you encounter this podcast, go ahead and subscribe, go ahead and follow, and let's continue to grow and make sports easy. Y'all take it easy, enjoy your sports, and happy holidays.